Good morning, everybody. Hello. Welcome to my webinar today. I'm Amanda Chadwick. I'm the senior speaker at Peninsula Business Services Limited. And today's webinar on the 19th of February 2014 is how to manage employees' health. During this webinar, we are going to cover mental health issues. We're going to talk about stress, depression, ways of managing it, and also an employee assistance program as well. I have a lot of experience in dealing with mental health issues and also mediating and representing at tribunal, and also helping tens of thousands of businesses throughout the UK manage underperformance, sickness and every issue with employment law. Peninsula Business Services, just to let you know, currently helps nearly 28,000 people and employers, throughout the UK manage their staff, and that means from underperformance to sickness to everyday issues like texting to keeping up to date with employment law, protecting people's health and safety as well. So let's get on with the presentation anyway. So it's going to be a jam-packed webinar today, so I think you'll find it interesting. My executive summary is long-term sickness is one headache that employers are forced to deal with that they wish they really didn't have to. And unfortunately, it's not something that is going to go away. Even the government are amending working time legislation to clarify the way employers are to deal with long-term sickness in relation to annual leave because of the problems it causes. A sure sign that is an issue we have to take seriously. Unfortunately, there is sometimes no other option than the dismissal of an employee who is on long-term sickness absence, of course, after a thorough procedure has been followed. And be aware here, I'm giving you an overview on law today. And really, you should have policies and procedures that are written in line with your business and tailor-made for your business. However, getting back to work is ultimately the goal of an employee on long-term sickness absence, and the employer has a significant role in the success of a return to work. So, the facts, and I've done another summary here just to say, you know, for everybody, you're all human beings. Life is hard enough as it is. We're all human. We spend an awful lot of time at work. We would hope that we enjoy the job and the company of our fellow employees. What we also have to accept is that employees can be affected by many things outside of your control, both, you know, inside of work, obviously, but also outside of work, such as family issues, debt, or relationship issues, and we've all been there throughout our ages, you know. And I say to you on the webinars, one of the most stressful times of my life is managing teenagers. You know, I've got 4 children, I've got 2 grandchildren, I've got another one, not another child on the way, for goodness sake, but another grandchild on the way. And the biggest pressure for me is when I've had to manage teenage issues such as mobile phones, staying up late, not coming in, you know, all the type of things you'd expect from a teenager, unless you're very lucky and you've got a very good one. But, you know, that's the type of issues that I've had stress with. And then what we have is that we experience as we get older, a bereavement when a family member dies. So my mother died a couple of years ago, and you know, it's handling those types of things and having to work as well, and all the other pressure of carrying on as normal. So, and then what we have is a lot of my friends, a lot of people I know, were doing quite well prior to the recession, and then what's happened is there's been a couple of layoffs, a couple of redundancies, and it's had a really big impact on their family life. And as a result of that, some of my friends are in debt and trying to struggle their way out. And again, the partner might have lost their job and the roles are reversed, so again, added pressures, and still having to come into work 9 to 5 and work as well. So we're going to talk about this. We're going to talk about helping people that have such issues as that, because we're all human, and some employees, no matter how hard they try, cannot split the two. If an employee is affected by any issues, they may still come to work, but for example, because they need the money, but with a lack of dexterity, that has an effect just not on their work but also on their colleagues. You may also have employees that have issues that make them stay away from work intermittently, or also long-term sick. An employer can make a job easier and more pleasant by implementing simple things in the workplace. And I'm a firm believer in development paths, incentives, recognition, and speaking to your staff and support as well. So we're going to talk about some of this. I also think in this day and age, an employee assistance program is a must. And, you know, it costs like £2 a day to offer a service that can support your staff, and it offers an unbiased outside support when things get too much. It is proven that absenteeism in all shapes and forms has a massive detrimental effect on a company's bottom line. And by introducing an employee assistance program, you're not only proving you're investing in your staff, but supporting them, and at the same time reducing absenteeism and saving yourself money. But one thing I've missed off there is you're getting involved right on the very first day, especially if stress has been alerted, and you're getting involved on the very first day, and you're managing it quickly and effectively to get the people the right help and the right support for the exact problem that they're suffering. So, okay, I thought what I would do here is talk about future changes to sickness that are coming in this year, because if you're listening to me and we're talking about health and mental health, I thought I'd talk about these changes that are coming in. It's not a bad thing to know them anyway. Recovery of statutory sick pay is to be abolished. So listen to what I'm saying here. It's currently employers can recover any statutory sick pay paid in a tax month that is over and above 13% of the gross Class 1 National Insurance contributions liability for that month. SSP recovery will no longer be possible from the 6th of April 2014. This action is being taken for various reasons, including the belief that the ability to recover money in this way is deterring employers from dealing with sickness absence. The money saved by the abolition will be used to fund the government's health and work service, which is planned for later on in 2014. So the health and work service, which is coming in, it's all part of the sickness absence reform that the government is to introduce the health and work service. And they say later on in 2014, but I'll be honest, I really think something like that has to have lots of groundwork, lots of tendering, getting the right people in, getting the right system in. And I don't know whether it's going to be in later on this year. I maybe think it might be early next year, but, you know, don't hold your breath on that. And what it's going to offer help to businesses who are dealing with employee long-term sickness. The service will be operated by private sector companies who will tender for the work, but will be offered for no cost. Now, that also alarms me, but that's my personal opinion. But where employees are off for sick for 4 weeks, their GP will be able to refer the employee to the service unless there are clear and well-defined reasons for not doing so. There is also opportunity for the employer to refer the employee themselves where the GP has not done so. And I've got a funny feeling that GPs won't. And the reason for this, they only have 8 to 10 minutes to see a client anyway, to see one of their patients. And in that time, they do medical assessments. There's saturation of the National Health Service and a point system, and it's just another thing, along with the fit note, that we're putting a lot of pressure on GPs now. So I can't see a lot referring patients, and I think a lot of it will be down to you. The service will include telephone or face-to-face assessment and recommendations for workplace adjustments, intervention and case management in order to assist the employee back to work. There is a drawback here to this service. It's the time. It's the time that the employer will need to wait for the employee to be referred to the service. And we, you know, I'm not going to bang on about our product here, but I'm going to tell you about it. Our Health Assured, our employee assistance program offers day one intervention, and the new high risk management team and employment advice services that we provide also provides guidance and support for our clients especially who have employees on long-term sickness absence. So what we've done is we've come up with a product alongside what the government are doing for our clients to manage these long-term sickness issues and short-term intermittent issues. And what we've produced is a high-end team that's all they deal with, but also at the same time on the back of that we've also got the employee assistance program. So if you say on day one I've got a member of staff that's off with stress immediately or depression, we can get your consent and the employee's consent to contact them and get things rolling right away at the very, very beginning from day one, which is early intervention, and we prove that works. So what are the facts with sickness, mental health issues, depression, burnout? You've heard it all spoken about. Well, you can't eliminate it, but you certainly can control it. People are absent from work on an average of 6.5 days per year, and sickness does cost the UK economy 17 billion per annum. You know, that's a hell of a lot of money. A quarter of that figure is stress sickness. 1 in 8 sick days are not genuine, and some employees consider sick days really as a perk. 2.7 million more sick days are had by smokers, and 131 million lost work days per year. We've got common ailments, haven't we? Coughs, colds, flu, those are for short duration, but the greatest number of days were lost for musculoskeletal reasons. So what are the reasons for absence? So we're going to cover some of them very quickly, but not bothered, not loyal, not committed. You're going to get those people, they're really not bothered about your company. And the sooner really for somebody who's not bothered about your company, they're not loyal, they're not bothered, they're not committed to you, the sooner really you deal with those people and get that dead wood out and find out what the issues are, then the better your company will be. We've got people that might be worried about a training or new product. They go off sick, they take time off, and what we need to do is reassure them. We've got people that might be bullied and harassed in work. So do you have an up-to-date bullying and harassment policy that includes a confidential helper? So if somebody is being bullied and harassed, that they have somebody, they know there's a clear route. And are you showing it everybody on day one? You know, children as well can be a reason for absence. If somebody's got a member of their family who's just started school and it's the September term and suddenly that member of staff is being late, they're off sick, they're not turning into work, they're saying they've got problems with children, you might want to speak to your staff. And it's at this point, I would say, if you've got a small workforce, you can manage it a little bit easier. But if you haven't got a small workforce, you've got a larger workforce, you know, this is where you write into your manager's job descriptions. It's up to them to manage their own staff, not the HR or the senior managers. It's their team leaders that know, they have to know their staff and spot trends. And if somebody is never off sick normally or never late, and then in September they are, I'm telling you, it's a children issue, it's a school issue. So speak to your staff. When I mediate and I think, gosh, this problem could have been sorted out right at the very beginning, it would have been sorted out if people had blooming bothered speaking to the staff at the very beginning, and rather than letting the issue drag out. So it could be debt, it could be relationship issues. As a, you know, it's like a vicious circle. You're in debt, you argue about it, you know, and it causes relationship issues. And then when a relationship splits up, it causes more debt issues. So it's offering support at the very beginning, saying it's not the end of the world. If you are having debt issues, there are ways of sorting it out. There are things that you can use. There are IVAs. There's all sorts of things that people can exercise the right to help them sort it out. And then we've got disability, short-term illness and pregnancy, all reasons for absence. The work may be they're too exhausted, or they've got training, or they're at college or university. So we need to look at what we've written into their contract there about other work. Health and safety. They might fear for their life because you work them to the bone. You know, they work long hours and there's a health and safety issue. They're not confident with the material and equipment that you provide. And then we've got other personal issues as well. Like I said, it might be caring for somebody. It might be they're worried about themselves and mental health issues as well. So what are the health and safety expected standards? Well, the health and safety executive, they expect the support that an employee receives whilst at work. They expect problems, they know that problems can arise when the worker's skills don't come up to the job and they're not helped or supported by their employer, direct manager or their colleagues. You know, they expect you to look at the role in the job. An employee can become stressed when unsure of their job or their role, for example. An employer doesn't recognise, for example, that as a manager but expects to act as one. So somebody who's working as a manager but doesn't have the respect or isn't recognised as a manager, they feel out of their depth as a manager. They're too closely managed and not given enough freedom. They're at conflict when they believe in one thing but they're expected to believe in the opposite. The employee's relationship with the people they work with. There might be interpersonal conflicts where two members of staff don't get on. There might be bullying and harassment. And the health and safety executive expects you to have provisions in place in your handbook to protect people against this. It could be the job. It could be monotonous. It could be the quantity, the pace and the content of the workload. It could be the targets. It could be too little work, it's as bad as too much. It could be the work schedules. It might be irregular shift patterns, inadequate breaks from work and uncertain hours that are stressors. And it also might be the physical environment where there's high noise levels, thermal comfort and the threat of violence are relevant. Sorry, just having a drink there. Just to give you examples of that. Tesco's. shopping in Tesco's at the moment. What is it with their not putting the heating on to protect the food? No wonder the apples aren't ripe. I'm not being funny. When you buy a peach now, it's like crunching into a Braeburn apple, isn't it? You know, because things aren't ripening. The whole shop is freezing. It's not just Tesco's. It's other businesses. But what about those staff that work there? Have you seen the staff on the till at Tesco's and other supermarkets? They're wrapped up, aren't they? In fleeces, in body warmers, in fingerless gloves. You know, they might as well have a hat and scarf on as well. The environment, the thermal comfort, you know, rather than protecting the food, what about your staff's health here? And we know that cold can make you miserable. And, you know, and then what about these people that work in the job centre, in doctor's surgeries, in places where there is a threat of violence, when people come in and say, I want an appointment now, you know, and then, you know, and then those receptionists there, again, are scared and in fear of their life, you know, so they're, you know, it's about making that physical environment comfortable for them, for putting provisions in place, maybe turn up the heating a bit, you know, in some places. So, here we go. The amount of control an employee has over their work as well. Stress can be caused by a lack of control, prescriptive routine where the work has little decision making, monotonous row, a job where it's monotonous, it's doing the same thing day out, day in. So let's have a look at mental health now. So we're going to come back to reasons for illness and sickness and stress, and I'm covering so much here today. I'm not covering one particular topic, but I thought I would talk about mental health because I did a few of these slides a few weeks ago on a mental health webinar, and actually it had lots of good feedback. So mental health is an issue. It isn't something that people do feel comfortable talking about, and the mental state in which we feel able to cope with the normal stresses of everyday life. So that's what mental health is. But no, positive mental health is rarely an absolute state. Mental health conditions can emerge suddenly or gradually, and persistent mental health can be classed as a disability. So we know disability is cancer, HIV, stress, depression, arthritis, dwarfism, dyslexia. But what we've got to also think about is we've also got to think about that certain people react differently to mental health as well. You know, some people might cope very well with stress, but other people might not cope at all. So, mental health for background. What is and what is not a mental health condition? Right. Stress and depression fall into a mental health condition. They're protected under the Mental Health Act if they're taking a drug or something similar like Prozac. So we've got stress and depression here. We've got anxiety. And what we've got here is it's very quickly turns from a day off with sickness with relationship issues to where people are worried about their relationship, to worrying about children, to worrying about the house, to worrying about paying the bills, causing stress and depression and then anxiety as well. And clinical stress, clinical depression, clinical anxiety is terrible for people. We also have bipolar disorder. We have schizophrenia and psychosis. Learning difficulties, dyslexia, Asperger's syndrome, ME, chronic fatigue, autism and epilepsy are not mental health conditions. The ones on the left are. There are two more really to add to that list, but they're more psychotic behaviours. And when we look at depression and we look at stress and we look at ways of managing it in the workplace, we need to be able to watch out for the clues really that we should, as managers, be able to spot. And it's about training here. So the popular misconceptions, and they are unusual, they're saying that mental health issues such as stress, depression, they're unusual. People don't get them. You don't suffer from them. Well, they're wrong because you do. Actually, 1 in 4 of us will suffer a mental health problem in our lives where people can't cope. And people can't, like I said, it might just be the death of a pet. It might be the death of a family member, the illness of a family member. It might be the burden of caring for somebody. And what you can see is certain people's personalities change, especially if you work with them for a while, where they break down crying at work, explosions of anger. And it's keeping an eye on this and being able to spot when you think somebody is suffering from a mental health or an illness in work. It does. People say it doesn't affect the bottom line. Well, it does, doesn't it? You're wrong. It does affect your bottom line. Bottom line. Mental health issues cost over 30 billion to businesses throughout the UK, and that's not all really. 91 million days lost per annum to mental health problems, and nearly half of all long-term sickness absence issues are caused by mental health problems. And we've got presenteeism. I can't even pronounce that word. Presenteeism. I can't even say it. If I'm getting it wrong, apologies there. So what we have there, and what that means is when somebody's coming into work because they need the money, they want to get away from home, but they're not actually doing the job they should be doing because their mind is elsewhere. This alone costs 15.1 billion per annum for companies, and especially if they don't know how to deal with it. And then there's the symptoms. It's lack of dexterity within the workplace. You know, it's somebody that's not hitting the job role. They're not doing the job that they should be doing. They're coming into work. They're not hitting the targets. They're maybe not hitting their company objectives. They're not doing what they should be doing. Mistakes are happening. And it's about early involvement again here. What we also have here is, why are we uncomfortable talking about mental health at work? It's not an embarrassment. It's not, you shouldn't be ashamed if you're suffering with an issue and it's affecting you. So quite often people think that if somebody's seen, you know, somebody at work, especially in higher management, is suffering from mental health issues such as depression, anxiety or stress, they see it as a criticism of their work. They see it that they're weak or unreliable. And actually 2 in 10 feel mental health issues are due to lack of willpower. And also because it's not visible, you can't see somebody with, you know, a cut, or, you know, looking unwell, or they actually have a visible illness. It's not visible, and therefore it's actually disturbing. And also we've got this British stiff upper lip, haven't we, where people aren't comfortable talking about mental health to their managers. And actually a current survey suggests that actually nearly 43% of people said they would not feel comfortable talking about mental health issues to their managers because they would feel like they're unreliable. They would feel like they wouldn't be put up for a promotion. So why are managers uncomfortable talking about mental health issues at work? Well, they may feel they are partly responsible. They don't have the confidence or knowledge to deal with it. But, you know, principles are similar to dealing with a physical issue, really, like a musculoskeletal. It's the support, it's the factor, it's the speaking to, it's the management, it's the keeping a note of. It's doing return to work interviews. It's everything you would expect to do. So what can you as a manager or organisation influence? Well, the factors you can control are somebody's workload. Looking at their workload. You know what we have is we have people that started, especially where companies are growing. A member of staff started off in admin or started with the company when it first started, and then they get promoted to the PA, then doing the health and safety, then doing the HR, and then everything else that, you know, is an admin role, and it's too much of a workload. So if somebody is showing, you know, signs of stressors or depression, you want to look at their workload, look at their work variety, look at their working relationships. Are they at conflict with other people? Have a look at their involvement within the business. Is there a task you can give them to give them new life? How about, you know, a culture of disclosure? And then we look at communications and bullying as well, and letting people know that we don't tolerate bullying or harassment, and that we also embrace mental health issues and people can talk about it. I'm not ashamed to say that my mother, although she was an incredible mother and she fostered lots and lots of children, and she actually brought up 7 children of her own, you know, she suffered mental health issues with bulimia and anorexia throughout her life, and you know, it didn't affect us. She kept it to herself, but we knew she had a mental health issue, and I think the more people that speak about these things, the more likely we are to embrace it within the workplace. And she also, you know, my dad was a Royal Marine, so he was away quite a bit, and she knew that sometimes she might be a little bit depressed because of that. So what she would have is manic episodes where she'd wake us up, you know, at like 7 in the morning and say, you know, it's the dog's birthday today, come on, we're celebrating. And she'd have the whole house done up, you know, like a birthday party before we went to school. And we'd have a massive party where when we came home from school, where she'd have baked cakes, etc. And she'd also, if she knew that, again, she was a bit miserable because my dad was away, and in those days they were away, you know, a year on end sometimes. She'd then also say it was the teddy bear's birthday today. She'd do erratic things like take us out of school for the day and take us, you know, to the beach, which actually didn't affect us in any way. But, you know, I think, you know, growing up that somebody does have a mental health issue, and I think the more that people accept it and embrace it and work with people and get early involvement. That means from day one we can deal with these issues so they don't go into long-term health issues where somebody might have a breakdown. Luckily my mum never did have a breakdown. She managed her mental health issues. So what we also have is the overlapping factors where you can try to influence, and you can try to influence this with money, maybe status, friendship, sense of purpose, the stress, the coping strategies and lifestyle choices, and that's where maybe an employee assistance program comes in. The factors you really can't control outside of work, but you could offer them some advice or put them into contact with an employee assistance program, is the childhood experiences that might affect them. Family relationships, addiction problems, finances, genetics, you can't help genetics, crime, housing and also bereavement. So that's mental health. The resources that are available to you are maybe internally, spot the signs, be a detective, return to work interviews, lateness policies, key performance indicators, looking at somebody's resilience, the lack of dexterity, their mood swings, sickness, poor concentration, irritable, bad-tempered and tearful. So spotting those signs straight away internally and then engage in the problem at the earliest stage, but also engage in the problem with other work members, with posters, and change them regularly. I've been into companies where they have the same poster up, for 12 months, and you think, well, I've sick of seeing it, so I don't look at it anymore. So posters, policies and procedures. Have a mental health awareness day. Keep a watching brief, and create an open culture and promote awareness of mental health issues. Educate your staff, but externally, an employee assistance program that allows people to have counselling, occupational health, GPs as well. So, clues to health problems, okay? I've listed some here for you. This is health problems. This isn't just mental health. This is also burnout as well. So it's people, that work with you that go, I can't take this anymore. That might be I would say, a trigger factor that maybe somebody's not coping with the job role. Bosses that shout instead of communicate. Bosses or employees who do, have you ever worked with people that, if it's a great idea, it's their idea, but if it's a bad idea, it's yours, and this can affect people. And if there's a mistake, admit the mistake, and if it is somebody's idea, let them have the recognition of it being their idea instead of stealing it yourself. So we've got bosses and employees who does all the work in the evening because they can't manage to concentrate during the working hours. Have you ever worked with people like that? They can't concentrate during the working hours because they've got lots on the plate, but the workload's too much and they can't answer questions, and then they have to stay later to get the work done. People that look busy and act busy and always seem to be stressed, but no work seems to get done. Mistakes are happening, figures or things look good on paper but aren't the true facts, and when you investigate a little bit further, they say it's somebody else's fault. They blame somebody else for it. Working all the time, mistakes are discovered, or can they cope without them? So somebody who's working all the time, they don't want to go off. Clues to health problems: exhaustion, overwhelmed employee, unhappiness, lack of dexterity, sickness issues, lateness issues, a not bothered attitude, inefficient and lower productivity, reduced commitment, not getting on with other members of staff, personality changed, disruptive, talking about leaving the company, absenteeism. So what are the causes of health problems? Well, the job could be too pressurized for somebody, so maybe that's an issue we could help with, where we could look at an alternative role and help you manage that under the grounds of capability. The job, it's too many demands, there's an overload of work. Again, looking at the job description, something we can help you with. Not letting go, won't delegate because they don't feel competent enough to delegate. Well, they don't feel the staff around them are competent enough, and they feel that it's their baby and they won't delegate. A manager delegates at the end of the day. Lack of training or resources. You're not giving them the right training. You aren't offering the right resources. I told you I make words up as I go along here. Or resources. Not efficient support staff. So look at the team below them and their training. Hardiness. Is the job right for them? Not all stress is bad, and some people just aren't suitable for the job that they've got. And then we've got the personality. Is it mismatched for the job role? And then also no recognition within the workplace. You're not recognising the good work they do. Or actually some managers are stealing the good work they do and saying it's as a result of them, you know, and they're not getting recognition. And then unfairness, giving their all, then overlooked for a promotion, but not because they're the person, the other person's better, just because the other person is a favourite maybe. It could be outside influences that's causing somebody's health problems. And a quarter of the UK sickness figures are attributable to stress. You know, what you've got to remember is that with stress and mental health issues, it can cause short spurts rather than long term. An employee could still be working. There could be poor performance and mistakes. There could be low morale and a knock-on effect. And, you know, introducing an EAP system. And also, what about keeping an eye with the paper trail? I'm going to talk about the documents shortly. Abide by the working time directive. It is one of the largest complaints in tribunals. So managing the health problems is making sure that people are working no more than 48 hours a week unless agreed or they've opted out. Making sure they're having the right breaks by having a break policy in your handbook, but also having a stress policy as well, and making sure that you're managing the working time directive. It is one of the biggest complaints, making sure they're taking their holidays. So having a holiday policy and making sure that people are managing them. They're taking their holidays. So if your holiday year starts in April, then making sure that they book their holidays April to, you know, say May, they've booked some holidays off, and asking them and reminding them that they've got to book some holidays. If it comes to the end of the year and they've got holidays left, that's really bad management on your behalf, really, and bad management on their workload too. And also, don't forget, if they go to tribunal because they've had a breakdown or a stress-related illness, and they look into the holidays and they say they haven't been able to take them, you're going to have lots of documents in place to defend yourself. So ultimately what you should be doing is making sure that people are taking holidays, that you've got a holiday request procedure in place, you've got a holiday policy in, that you make sure that people are taking them, and that way that somebody can't go to tribunal and backdate their holidays for 6 years and then you have a big payout. And then what we've got is also work breaks, making sure that they are taking the breaks and managing them again, and having a break policy in there, not just saying, oh, 15 minutes every 20 minutes every 6 hours, but actually specifically written for them, as in young workers, apprentices, and people that work on, you know, computers, for example. Looking at the other work and the implications of it. If somebody is doing extra training or actually has another job, you really should have a statement in their handbook under the working time regulations that says that they have to let you know if they are. So you consider the implications of other work, because you are the main employer. You are actually responsible for knowing of the hours that they are doing for another job and adding them to the main hours for you. And if it comes to young workers, they could already be entitled to a break before they start working with you if they have another job. So have a look at other working implications, because it has a detrimental effect on people's health if they're working too many hours or learning for too many hours or volunteering. And also, what are your company requirements and expectations? Tell them about that happy work-life balance. You know, I should get an alarm clock, I tell you this, but I use my works phone as my alarm clock. But you'll always get somebody, won't you, sending an email at 1 o'clock in the morning. You think, you know, you've not got a life, really. Or even sending emails after 10 o'clock at night. There should be a work-life balance here. Just because other people are doing it doesn't mean to say I'm going to be sad and do it. You know, there's a little message there, by the way, for employees that I work with, that, you know, really, you should be shutting off at a certain time, shouldn't you? Unless you are on the 24-hour advice line. But, you know, an ordinary person that's working in an office, they shouldn't be sending emails at 10, 11, 12, 1 o'clock in the morning just to prove that they work hard. They should actually be doing them, at the latest, I'd say, is 7 o'clock at night. So what are your company requirements? And you might want to have a policy that highlights your company requirements and expectations regarding smartphones and email response. You know, if somebody sends you an email at 10 o'clock at night because it's the easiest time for them, don't tell your employees that they're not expected to respond to that email. Try to look at the job role and responsibility. You know, as I said, admin role to a PA. Remind employees of the healthy work-life balance, and look at the targets. If somebody's saying to you targets aren't great, are they attainable? Are they really in line with your your key performance indicators. And remember, stress isn't always work related. It's not always a bad thing. So what preventative measures can we put in place? We can introduce small incentives. And if you want, I haven't got time today to go through what those small incentives are because, you know, we are on a long webinar as it is. But, you know, pick up my webinar on incentives and motivation that's on YouTube and have a look at some of those incentives. You'll know a large part of my background is studying your workforce, creating incentives and motivational tools and managing sickness and absence. So you might want to look at the ideas that I've thought of. Make work fun. Oh, do you know, you spend half your life in work. Why do you want to work with people that don't make you laugh, that don't make you have a great time, you know, that you don't enjoy working with? Create some fun in the workplace. We all want to come into work and get on, you know. Make sure your staff are taking the holidays, make sure adequate breaks are taken, manage the workload, check driving hours and the journeys that they're doing, have health questionnaires. Remember, you can't use them until you offer somebody a job, but what about an annual health questionnaire? And then an annual health statement as well in your handbook that says if your medical condition changes, you're having counselling, you're taking tablets, or you have a disability, you have to let us know written at the earliest stage possible. And that way you're informed straight away if somebody is ill. And then any decisions you make about somebody's future are based on the facts that you've got. And you can prove through your handbook that you asked for those facts to be true and honest. What about occupational health? I keep mentioning employee assistance program, and don't expect too much from staff. You know, just because you're cutting corners and cutting costs, don't expect them to pick up other people's tasks. You know, it gets too much of a workload, doesn't it? And then you're really going to have a problem with sickness anyway. Check the job description. Make sure that people's job descriptions are in line with what they're doing. And if you need any help with that as our clients, you know, you really should be ringing us about any help. Job title change. If you can't afford a pay rise, what about a job title change for recognition? Give somebody an uplift. Having policies in place but not knowing how to use them as tools, such as stress policies, capability policies, bullying and harassment policies, return to work interviews, sickness policies, knowing that they're there but not knowing how you can use them to save yourself some money, being trained to use them. And then it comes to management training. Write into their job description that they are responsible for doing return to work interviews after 1 day to help you manage the sickness. It's part of their just job description. You know, I speak to so many HR people that say it all falls down to them. Well, you know what? You are responsible for human resources. You're responsible for sickness, so delegate some of that responsibility to your managers. Get them to do return to work interviews and write it into their job description. Top level support as well. You need top level support from your directors, the proprietors, the owners and the trustees. So get it. Highlight how much. Play my webinar if you have to. Let them know how much it's costing your company and the economy through sickness and not understanding sickness, mental health issues and all sorts of other things. So training as well. Make training available so people understand, you know, about what bullying and harassment is, what is equal opportunities, making sure that your staff are aware of what mental health issues is, you know, and be supportive. Have an open door, but mean it. Don't just say, well, we have an open door policy, but it's always closed. Mean that you have an open door policy. People can talk to you. Remember to be confidential here so that they trust you. Speak to your staff. Gosh, I put that in all the time because, as I said to you, employers, even HR, you know, you have, I know you have your other work and other jobs to do, but you need to manage and speak to your staff at the earliest stages, socialising and team bonding. And you know what? You're going to have a great business if you can create camaraderie between your staff, between your workforce, where people rely on each other. Don't worry, Amanda, I'll pick that up. I can cope with that. Just let me know if it's too much. You know, great camaraderie because everybody wants to work in a fantastic team. So, preventative measures, be fair, be consistent with any decision when it comes to sickness and managing absenteeism. Ask staff to input into decisions that you're going to make. Educate staff on burnout, stress and mental health. Encourage the work-life balance. Provide classes maybe to attend for relaxation or keep fit to let steam off. You know, that could be having an empty room and then just asking, advertising, or does somebody know somebody who does yoga or meditation? And you know what? We have these classes at Peninsula. And you'd be surprised how many people actually go to them, you know. So they are. You can get somebody who charges, but you just give the room for free. You get the expert come in. They can charge your staff, and you know that at the end of the day, you might give it a discount and subsidise it. But you're helping with their mental health, and it's evidence for you if you do have a tribunal. And they say, what did you actually do to support this member of staff? Well, we did return to work interviews from day one. We had an induction where we pointed out the importance of sickness and mental health. We spoke to them every time they came back. We managed their sickness. We access their medical records with their permission. We did everything possible. We even had meditation classes within work. We did recognition. You can have evidence then of everything that you've done to prove that you're a good employer. Provide a counsellor. Delegate responsibility to an employee who might be the confidential helper and the touch-based person for anybody who wants to speak to, somebody who's neutral about any issues they're having within work. A simple reward systems for praise and recognition, and how about an anonymous survey within work to see what's really going on. So what useful documents and policies do I think you should use? The health questionnaire. Remember, not before you've offered them the job, and then annually. It's a protective piece of document, isn't it? People's health changes. People can lie to stay in work. We need to have the true facts here, because any decision we make within work has to be based on the facts that are available to us. Key performance indicators. If we've got key performance indicators in place, we'll know when somebody's falling below the expected minimum standard. And appraisals. This is your opportunity to speak to your staff and sit with them and say, you know, is there anything troubling you? Is there any other things you want to talk to me about? How do you think you performed? How are you doing at work? You know, I want to talk to you about your sickness. I want to talk to you about this. You know, this is your time with them. Equal opportunity policy. Race, religion, disability, you know, race, religion, religious belief, no belief, environmental belief, political opinion, affiliation, marital status, disability, gender, gender reassignment, age. Gosh, the list is endless now, isn't it? You know, protective characteristics, but having an equal opportunity policy, having a bullying and harassment policy, having a confidential helper, but not just having it, showing everybody it on day one so they know where to go if there is an issue. Grievance procedure, by law you should have that. Medical statements, adverts, application forms, you know, making sure that in your job adverts you include what the job entails so people aren't surprised then if it is stressful, if it is hitting targets. Application forms. You know, have you had the chance to see The Wolf of Wall Street yet? Amazing film. I know it's not a great film in because it's a true story and the man ripped loads of people off, but take that to one side, take your time out to watch it and look at camaraderie there, look at motivate. I'm not saying throw people with you know, in the part of the film, I'm not saying you should do that. They throw people that are dwarfs onto a dartboard. I'm not saying do that. You know, obviously, gosh, I'm not expecting you to shave people's hair off in work either, or to walk around in your underwear and take drugs and drink. What I'm trying to say here is, you know, it's got a really great camaraderie and working environment. If we can achieve that without discriminating, with bringing incentives in and bringing recognition in, you're going to have fantastic companies. And, you know, I've worked with companies and I've achieved that with them, and I really want you to have that within your company where everybody likes everybody, everybody gets on and everybody works. And I know I'm probably living in a dream world here, but I have worked with companies where that's true, and it's done by speaking to your staff, by using these documents that I'm talking about, and by stopping those people taking the mickey on day one and saying we take this seriously. We do return to work interviews, not just to say are you well enough to be in work and to protect our business, but for health and safety as well, so we get the true facts, and to say to you, you know, we're running a business at the end of the day, we're taking this seriously, we want to do something about it. And then, you know, you might actually use the Bradford scale, but remember, if you're using that, adapt it for disability and pregnancy. A capability policy, and that is so brilliant, the capability policy, because it's self-explanatory. It's a self-help policy which you can use not just for sickness, short-term and long-term, but it might be a training issue or an age issue, or it might be something else. So stress policy, industry specific. And then return to work interviews. I cannot tell you how important they are within your company. One, they're a defence document. Two, people can't lie then, change their mind and say it's work-related sickness and not home life when they initially said it was home life. You can prove by doing return to work interviews that you're managing it. And if you are managing it under sickness and your sickness policies and you're sitting with them, you've got all the evidence you need to defend yourself if you do have a tribunal. And then having an absence procedure and management system in place as well. And remember, absenteeism, writing it and linking it to core hours and overtime. So what is short-term absenteeism? It's when does it become long-term? Timescales are usually 6 to 8 weeks, and it's about the consistency and reasonableness here. And then, obviously what we've got then is a shift to medical capability, and you should really have a capability policy there. We've got the fit note now as well. Remember that I've mentioned this here because it is so important. It's the new Med 3 form. Well, it's not new anymore. It used to be known as a sick note. It's now referred to as a fit note. It is an integral role in getting people back to work, but lots of doctors aren't putting lots of information on there. So it's up to you to do that return to work interview, to speak to your staff and look at what the doctors put on there. When they're saying light duty, speak to your staff and ask them what they meant. And then, you should really consider the recommendations of the fit note seriously to see if they can be accommodated. And then it might be phased return to work. And also there's lots of other options as well. If somebody's saying the job is too much, compressed hours, term working, part-time working, home working, remote working, there's all sorts of things that can play a massive impact on getting somebody back into work and doing the job they should be doing. So I just thought I'd put in here the working time regulations, just to remind you again, it's a limit of an average of 48 hours a week, 5.6 weeks paid leave a year, 11 consecutive hours rest in any 24-hour period, a 20-minute rest break if the working day is longer than 6 hours, and 1 day off each week. And I'm talking just here on a general worker. There are certain requirements for young workers, apprentices, and also remember there's certain requirements for obviously risk assessments for people with health issues. I've just given you an overview here. I just thought I'd quickly touch on it to remind you, because we spoke about it earlier on, the working time regulations, because if you're not compliant it can have a detrimental impact on somebody's health. And remember, there are special regulations for young workers. Any proposals to change patterns of working are best carried out in a consultative way, explaining the reasons behind such a move and the benefits which may accrue to both the organisation and worker. So, and remember, the Health and Safety Executive is responsible for the enforcement of the maximum weekly working time limit, night work limits and health assessments for night work. They're not enforcing time off, rest breaks or paid annual leave entitlements. But that is up to you to manage. If you get that wrong, please believe you me, you'll pay in tribunal. So, an employee assistance program, it is a useful tool, and I'm going to take 60 seconds out to tell you why. And then I'm going to give you a really sort of a sickness story, and then I'm going to talk about how that person now is very happy in their job and they had depression and stress and they were off sick. They weren't off sick, they were actually in work. So as an employer, what can you do to address the issue of sickness? Well, research shows that early proactive intervention is the key. Providing support from the earliest moment has been shown to both help the individual and positively influence an earlier return to work than would otherwise have been the case. An employee assistance program helps to tackle absenteeism and improve productivity and morale among the workforce. And the EAP has been shown to be one of the most cost-effective ways of making sure that your employees have support if they're suffering from stress. The Peninsula Health Assured EAP is the only scheme of its kind specifically tailored to the needs of small businesses. It allows employers to provide employees with a confidential support service, which, like our advice service, runs 24 hours a day, 365 days of the year. It allows the employee to access an experienced health clinician with full qualifications and accreditation in counselling for advice and support throughout difficult times. The Employee Assistance Programme can help with a huge range of issues from debt, legal issues and family matters to substance abuse and stress. Face-to-face counselling is included where appropriate and can happen from day one, and there is an online health portal for information and guidance as well. It's absolutely confidential. Confidentiality for the employee is guaranteed, and by providing this service to your employees, you increase the chances of nipping problems in the bud at an early stage. And remember, prevention, as always, even with employment law, is better than cure. National research shows that using an EAP can reduce absence by 34% on average, and that 94.7% of employees return to work within 14 days. If you think that stress and depression can go on for months on end, it's crucial with an early intervention. we've had a tremendous take-up, and we recently surveyed some of our clients who have taken out our employee assistance program, and they're seeing around a 29% reduction in absenteeism, and at a cost of about £2 per employee per month. It is obviously a tremendous return on investment. For such a small cost per head, we believe this service is a must for employers, you know. And then also what we've got for our clients now is we've got that special team and task force set up for long-term sick and short-term sick and management and absenteeism as well, which you can be put through to straight away. It's an essential tool, especially in this current climate. It includes online health and fitness assessments as well as stress audits to spot problems earlier on, specialist helpline, face-to-face counselling, active care from occupational health professionals, integrated solution, helps with quick turnaround and solution, significantly reduces absent rates. And just to give you that sad story but good story, worked with a lady who had an employee working for her who was a woman that had been with her since leaving school, and she was a receptionist. The lady was a receptionist who was married. She'd had a baby. Everything had been great before she had her first baby, but then when she had her first baby, her husband, she found out, was having an affair. And it sounds like Take a Break, this, or Jeremy Kyle, but please believe me, it's not. It's a true story. And I'm not saying Jeremy Kyle or Take a Break aren't true stories, but mine is a true story today, and how we managed to support somebody. The lady herself, the owner of the business, absolutely really liked her member of staff and wanted to support her the best she could. And she said it's just that she isn't actually off sick. She said what's happened is she's had a baby, her husband's had an affair, and he's left her for this other woman, but she's then found out within weeks of having this other baby that she's pregnant again. The problem she's got, she said, is she looks dead on her feet. She's coming into work, she's making loads of mistakes, she's not very presentable at the counter at the reception, and I just want that old employee back, but I don't want to dismiss her, I don't want to discipline her, I just really don't know how to handle it and want to speak to her. She said, I'm even willing to pay full sick pay so she can have a couple of weeks off to get herself together, and I really embrace the idea of all flexible working, you know, part-time working, job sharing, all that. I really agree with it. I can't let her homework because she's a receptionist, but I don't mind her job sharing, but I don't even think she's got the get up and go herself to look into that at the moment. So my suggestion was to speak to her and to really tell her the truth and to speak to her in a gentle way. And the lady did, and she actually said, I had a real good heart-to-heart with her and said, look, she's made a few mistakes I've spotted. I know she's had a terrible time. I know that her husband's left her. I know she's now got 2 small children. She had 2 small children. She came back to work 6 weeks after having the second child. She said because she needed the money to support the children. She knew that she had really good family support, but she also said to her that she'd like her to take a couple of weeks off just to get herself together, and she'd pay for her to have the time off, and it wouldn't have any detrimental effect on her or work. So she did that. The lady had time off, and she came back to work. She went part-time, she went job share, she sought out the help she had with support through the company, and the employee is now back in work today. So I hope that gives you a message to say things are manageable, and and also like to say that if you want any information about our webinar or anything I've spoken about today, you can contact me via my YouTube channel, my email address, but always remember to quote webinar 50. I'd like to thank you very much for listening today, and you know, it's not always a sad story, so it's goodbye from me. Thank you.